We finally made it. Week 1 is here, and the Panthers are headed to New Orleans. We'll talk about what to expect from the Panthers this week right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays here on the show throughout the entirety of the regular season, I'll be here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. This episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. Prize Picks, run your game. We have made it, folks. It took a long time, but we are here. We are here to week 1 of the 2024 NFL regular season. The Panthers heading on the road down to New Orleans, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And I cannot wait. I enjoy talking Panthers with you all year long, but I enjoy it a lot more when we're in season. Like free agency, really fun. Talking about the general manager and head coaching searches every offseason, not as fun, but I do enjoy talking about that team building aspect of it. The draft, not necessarily my favorite time of the year. A lot of wasted breath on players who will never be Panthers, but still things to talk about. But what I really love are the games. What happens on Sundays in the fall from September to January and fingers crossed February. That's what we're all here to do, and we get to finally do it this week as the Panthers head down to face off against the Saints. And man, I am really interested to see how this team gets off the ground, because there are a lot of unknowns if you think about it heading into this week 1 matchup. We don't really know what Dave Canales' offense is going to look like. He can sit here and talk about how when they ran the ball against the Jets a couple of weeks ago in that second preseason game with Dylan Johnson, they pounded in as time expired. That's them establishing their identity. Dylan Johnson was cut the following week. The majority of players on the team then are no longer around. I don't want to hear anything about an identity being established by third stringers in a preseason game. That's going to happen now, this week in the game. Now, you certainly hope that the identity of the team, that the culture has been developed since the spring, but really, we're not going to find out who they are until Sunday. And really, over the course of the first month of the season, I think through 4 or 5 games in a 17-game season, you kind of know who your team's going to be. Now, the great thing about having a 17-game season and the way the NFL is, you have time to get better. You have time to figure out who you truly are going to be, to have an identity. But you don't want to waste too much time in doing that. And we sat here last year, watched the team go 0-6 heading into the bye, and they had no clue who they were going to be. And even after coming out of that bye, winning that game against Houston, they still did not know who they wanted to be. It seems like Dave Canales is pretty clear on who he wants his football team to be. A team that runs the damn ball. A team that is fast, that's physical, that plays with passion, emotion, but smart. That's what he wants his team to be. And we've heard about that all offseason long. I don't ever really feel like Frank Reich told us exactly what he wanted his team to be. Thomas Brown, he did lay out how he wanted the offense to look like, and that never came to fruition. Frank Reich, not Frank Reich, but Matt Rule certainly had no clue what he wanted his team to look like and what he was even doing at all in the NFL. Steve Wilks, though, established an identity right off the bat after that game against the Rams on the road where he wouldn't let PJ Walker throw the ball across the line of scrimmage, they came back against Tampa and they ran the ball down their throat, and they did that the entirety of the season. They ran the ball, they played defense. And does that not sound like Carolina Panthers football to you? Is not what this team did in 03 when they had Steven Davis. Now, they also had Moose. They also had Steve Smith, Ricky Prohl. They could throw it a little bit with Jake Delhomme at quarterback, but they ran the ball. And they played a hell of a great defense, and they were the cardiac cats. And they came back and they won those games. They had great special teams, a kicker that they could rely on. They did that. And, 2015, that was a team that was high-flying offense. They could run the damn ball, and they played great defense. This team, when it's been its best, has controlled the line of scrimmage by running the football and playing good defense. And I look at the team going into the season, like offensively, I feel quite confident that the Panthers are going to be a team that's going to run the ball effectively. When you bring in Robert Hunt, you bring in Damian Lewis, you have Austin Corbett back healthy at that center spot. Ike Ekwonu, who you always talk about, better off being a guard because you look at his ability to road grade as a run blocker. Those are some real big dudes to lean on with Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders toting the rock to begin the season until we'll see what happens with Jonathan Brooks and what kind of role he's able to play as a rookie this season in Carolina. I feel confident in their ability to run the ball. I also feel confident in their ability to be pretty solid off of play action and have guys who now can do something. With Thielen and really primarily Deontay Johnson, they now have not one, but two receivers who Bryce Young can depend upon. Now, if anything ever happens to any of them, primarily Deontay Johnson, that is going to severely impede the Panthers' ability to win the game on that Sunday and the Sundays to come. But with that collection of talent up front, on the offensive line, with Hubbard, who really shined last year, and I think is going to have a breakout year this season in the NFL, and with two more than capable veteran wide receivers, that is a recipe for your quarterback, Bryce Young, to have success this year and for the offense to look competent, not just competent, to look above average and quite possibly good at times. Not all the time, because they're going to have their struggles, certainly. But I look at this offense and I expect him to actually be able to play and not be just complete dreck like we've seen the last couple of years. Defensively, certainly questions about whether they're going to be able to stop the pass by being able to get after the passer. I don't think that's necessarily a question, but I think it's really an answer, and the answer is going to be no this year. But the rest of it, though, they're designed to be able to stop the run this season. A'Shawn Robinson is a major upgrade, in my opinion, over to Deshaun Williams on that defensive line as a run stopper. You bring in Jadeveon Clowney, speaking of major upgrades as far as run stoppers go. Brian Burns, that was a weakness in his game. And Clowney, he sets a mentality, man, and he's not going to let anybody run over him. And he said throughout his career so far, have you ever seen anyone run over me? No. So I think that's going to be improved this year, stopping the run, Shaq being back, adding in Josie Jewell into a Jero Vero scheme as well. I do like the secondary. As far as the safeties go, Nick Scott was not great last year in Cincinnati, but I think it's more of a scheme problem than necessarily he just wasn't him being a problem. So with him, with Jordan Fuller and Xavier Woods being those three starting safeties, I think that they're good there. Corner, JC's got to stay healthy. If he does, no, they got to figure out how the safety room is going to look. And they brought in a bunch of guys last week who are relative no names so far in the NFL. Mike Jackson's an experienced player, and Dane Jackson will be back at some point in time. And I think once he is, they're going to be okay as long as JC stays healthy. So defensively, they're going to struggle to get after the passer. But outside of that, they're set up to have success in a lot of other areas on defense and on offense. It's going to come down to, can they execute? Can they get the football right? That's what Dave Canales has been saying from the beginning. So there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things that we've talked about, we think are going to play out, but we just don't know until they strap it up, toe meets leather, and they face off against the Saints on Sunday. And that begins, in my opinion, a stretch of winnable games. They can beat New Orleans on the road. They can beat the Chargers at home. They can win at Las Vegas. Those are three games where 3-0 is a possibility, 2-1 is a possibility, 1-2 is a possibility, 0-3, obviously a possibility, but I don't really see it. I see probably more 2-1 or 1-2. Would not be surprised, though, if they are able to steal one on the road or hold serve at home for one game. And then you got Cincinnati coming to town, a re-energized fan base, and you're facing up against Joe Burrow and what it should be a contender in the AFC and those Bengals this upcoming season. So game week, it's finally here. Plenty of unknowns heading to week one, but I'm excited to see how it plays out. And I think this is a season that we're going to be able to enjoy more so than we have the last couple of years when watching the Panthers do absolutely nothing on offense. And quite possibly there could be hope restored when looking at the quarterback position long term here in Carolina. Dave Canales, Panthers head coach, had his first Monday availability as head coach during a game week as he spoke to the media on Monday. Go over what he had to say as there may be concerns about the Panthers tight end position heading into week one against New Orleans on Sunday. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Football season is back, and the best way to get to games this fall is with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something you love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Gardening, a new language, or maybe how to finally beat your friend in bowling. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back-to-school era can come at any age. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Dave Canales and the Panthers were working on Labor Day. They were laboring while the rest of us had the day off. I guess the rest of you had a day off. I have been working all day on Labor Day as I got this show out to you a little bit later than I typically do. But still, Dave Canales had his commentary to the media on Monday, first Monday morning press conference as Panthers head coach during the regular season of a Panthers game as they face off against the Saints down in New Orleans on Sunday. And he was asked how the Panthers named and voted on captains yet. He did say they have, and they're going to announce that later on in the week. So wait and see what happens. And this is what he also mentioned. There's going to be one captain on offense, one on defense, one on special teams. Then he would like to rotate a fourth. Now I'm curious to see who the captains end up being. We see all across the NFL, whether the quarterback should or should not be the captain. He's going to be the captain. So is Bryce Young a shoo-in to be captain again as their starting quarterback? That would be great that the team voted on him to be that. He could also, rotate in to be it, but you would expect that your quarterback would be the captain of the offense, even if he's not necessarily the true leader of the offense. But Bryce Young probably going to be your offensive captain. Defensively, I'm guessing, Shaq Thompson would be the captain, either him or Derek Brown or JC Horn if he's going based off of the talent in that room. I mean, JC and Derek Brown are better players, of course, but Shaq Thompson has been here for, a decade now, which is just insane to think it's been that long, and he's been that impactful of a player for the Panthers over the last couple of years coming off that injury. Shaq, I would think, would probably be the captain. And then defensively, got to be JJ Jansen, no? Or special teams-wise, JJ Jansen? JJ? I would have thought Sam Franklin Jr. would have had an opportunity as he's been a special teams ace, but I think that's probably JJ Jansen, and then, of course, we'll rotate the fourth. So you all let me know what y'all think who's going to be the captains. As Dave said, he wants to have three, one on offense, one on defense, one on special teams, and then rotate a fourth for every game. He also gave an update on the whereabouts of Jadeveon Clowney, Ian Thomas, and Tommy Tremble as they were all MIA on Monday morning at practice. Jadeveon Clowney missed practice due to an illness, so not something you should be super concerned about, it sounds like. Now, when you first saw that on Twitter, I'm guessing you're like, well, that's not great. Okay, it's okay. He's fine. He's just a little sick. He's under the weather, and it's one of the things where Dave has consistently done this. If a guy shows up, he ain't feeling well, they send him home. not trying to get anybody else on the team sick. You got to quarantine that dude. Still get the work in virtually if you need to, but he can't be out there. I don't think that should be a problem at all for the Panthers as they prepare for their week 1 road trip to New Orleans. Thomas, though, and Tremble, though, that is something that I am a little concerned about. We did see in the preseason finale, the pseudo dress rehearsal as the Panthers ones only played a series, both on offense and on defense. We saw heavily involved in that offensive series, the 2 tight ends and Jordan Matthews, who had 2 catches, one of them being a touchdown, and JT Sanders getting a catch also. And right now, how things are looking, and at practice on Monday, those 2 would be the starting tight ends, as Tommy Tremble, who dealt with a hamstring, and then Ian Thomas has been dealing with a calf. Those guys have really not been a part of practice in the preseason that much over the course of the last month. Now, Tommy's come back, and he's been back out there as he came back right around. It was the week of joint practice with the Jets. He was right back out there. He did not play in the preseason games, either one of them, and they've been trying to monitor him. And it's one of the things where I've talked about this, mentioning all the other injuries that we talked about, and Canales not wanting to give timelines at all right now is to get closer to the game. And that started about a week and a half ago, where he was not trying to be as open with the media as far as who would be available, who would not be available, how long they're going to be out, all that jazz. Well, I think that Tremble's probably closer, just based on the fact that he's at least been out there the last couple of weeks. Ian Thomas, I have not. When I was out there during training camp, never saw him after he went down with the calf injury, and we did not see him in the preseason. And it sounds like he also has not been practicing the last 2 weeks. So while that was somebody who he said, we're going to figure out, he being Dave Canales, we're going to have to find out come week 1 whether he's going to play or not. It really feels like, as we are here in week 1, he's not going to play. And the Panthers making that move over the weekend to put Jaden Crumedy, the 6th-round defensive tackle out of Mississippi State, onto IR, injury report, by the way, if you know what IR means. And then they elevated, and not just elevated, signed but Jordan Matthews to the active roster. That kind of pointed also towards their need for another tight end. Probably the fact that they don't feel good about Ian Thomas being available to go. Now, when Matthews didn't make the team last week, initially felt like, all right, they can always elevate him. Not a big deal. Maybe they feel good about Ian Thomas. Now, after seeing Ian Thomas out of practice on Monday, and with Tremble also missing some time, it feels like they're going to definitely need to have Jordan Matthews rather ready to go. Same thing when it comes to JT Sanders on Sunday. So that's one thing to monitor the rest of the week. The coordinators will not be in the booth. They'll actually be both or on the field, as Canales wants to really have that communication. We'll see if any of that ever changes. I would expect that Brad Idzik would stay on the field, and Ajero Vero, I'm trying to remember whether he was on the field last year or not. I believe he was. So just, it's always been preference that typically they decide whether a coach feels comfortable in the booth or he feels more comfortable on the field. I always felt like it made probably more sense just to be on the field to be able to communicate your players face-to-face opposed to being up the box. But you get a different vantage point from up there. Again, it's just all based on the coach's comfort level and obviously the head coach and what he wants to see as far as the operation on game day. So those were the key updates from Dave Canales' media availability on Monday's Panthers prepare to face off against New Orleans on Sunday afternoon. The practice squad gave you an update last week before heading out of town to where that was at. The practice squad now is filled out. We'll go over who those players are and some of the impacts that potentially they could make, and also some of the corresponding moves that were made over the weekend here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Taking a look at the Panthers roster as they have filled out their practice squad, something we have been following over the last couple of days. They've had signings and they go up some guys, and now things seem to be a little settled, at least for week one. And like the active roster, the 53-man roster, the practice squad with 16 players. Now they actually have 17 thanks to a signing of an international player. We'll go over who those guys are. The Panthers are always going to be adding guys, getting rid of guys. There's potential that there's guys that will be signed off at their practice squad. They'll be signed onto an active roster elsewhere if they do not protect said player, the elevations and all of that. And if you elevate a guy too many times, he's going to have to be signed to the active roster. So understand, while it's set right now, at least it appears to be here on Labor Day, Monday, it's going to change throughout the course of the season, much like the active roster. But looking at things right now, they have Lonnie Johnson Jr., a corner. And this is an important one to note, as when the report came out last week, when the Panthers were getting their 6 waiver claims, and the majority of those guys were defensive backs, they were also going to be signing Lonnie Johnson Jr. to their practice squad. He was a veteran player playing with the Texans to begin his career, then went to Tennessee. Last year spent time in New Orleans. The Panthers, of course, are playing against his former team on Sunday, and he tweeted out when the report came out last week, New Orleans, love you, but I do have a little beef with the front office for not bringing me back. He also been telling the fans who had been clamoring for him to re-sign that it likely wasn't going to happen. As we see now, he's here in Carolina. The expectation is that he is going to be elevated from the practice squad to the active roster on Sunday afternoon. And when looking at the rest of the guys that were signed to the practice squad to the active roster last week, it would make a ton of sense just looking at the cornerback room. The Panthers are going to, of course, start J.C. Horn. They're going to start Mike Jackson. But the rest of them, Charles Smith-Wade has never played an NFL game because he's a rookie. This will be the first one he ever plays in if he does even play on Sunday. Shamar Bartholomew doesn't have a ton of experience. Tariq Castro-Fields, not a ton of experience. Keenan Isaac, not a ton of experience. Would make all the sense in the world for Teron Johnson, for Lonnie Johnson Jr. to be on the active roster, the standard practice squad of elevation on Sunday in that week one matchup, and you're not having yourself in a situation where a player who's inexperienced is having to play for you week one. So that's something that's to be expected. He's on the practice squad. Jaden Peavy, who was on the team throughout training camp, they have brought him back. Him and TJ Smith, both defensive tackles. They signed a guard in J.T. Carter. Chandler Wooten, who has been on the active roster the last couple of years as a special teams ace at that inside linebacker position. Also, he was signed back. Kenny Dyson, who spent training camp the preseason with the Panthers at outside linebacker, he's still here. They signed a couple of guys off the street who are outside linebackers, and Thomas Ingum and Teron Jackson. They brought in a tackle as well in Brandon Walton. Jack Plummer, he's still here. Mike Boone as well, the running back, who would not be surprised if he's able to get some elevations here as things start off the season, as he's able to return kicks for them, adds another presence in that running back room, as the Panthers are planning on leaning heavily on Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and of course Raheem Blackshear primarily as a returner. Would not be surprised to see that happening either this week or in the coming weeks, as they still wait to see the status of Jonathan Brooks, who is on a non-football injury list and is out at least the first 4 weeks of this season. Damani Richardson, he made the team and he was released. He's back on the practice squad. Good to see, as he really impressed throughout training camp. And tough to see a guy to make the team and then be told the next day, actually, you're not on the team right now. He's back, and he also had some depth there at safety. As Panthers now have 5 safeties on just their overall roster. Tight end Felipe Franks, who signed early on in training camp, but had all those injuries, formerly a quarterback when he played in college at Florida and at Arkansas, transitioned tight end a couple years ago. I thought he impressed throughout camp, and I was really surprised. This is a guy that I just remember watching in college. Big arm, wasn't a great quarterback, playing tight end. As we've talked about, that is a tough position to play developmentally. And you look at the 2 toughest positions probably developmentally to play in the NFL are tight end and quarterback. And offensive line also is tough there. And this guy is now taking a stab at both of them, and he's done pretty well so far. So the Panthers needed another tight end. Felipe Franks is there. And a couple wide receivers. Deion Kane, formerly of Clemson, big-time player. He's now here in Carolina. Jalen Coker, who was on the roster. They got rid of him, able to re-sign him back to the practice squad. And in the final player, as I mentioned, international pathways. The Panthers can be able to sign one of those players and have that count as their practice squad player, where they can have 17. Praise Latoke. He is the guy. I don't think I got his name right, but he's on the team now. Dave Canales talked about his speed, which is great. We'll see if they ever utilize that this season. But we'll watch out and wait and see how that works out. some of the corresponding moves they made over the weekend. Alex Cook, he's no longer here. That one's surprising to me. He didn't play well, I guess, the last 2 preseason games, but he was a good player for them when they needed him last year and came out, looked great early on. He's no longer here. Defensive tackle Walter Polmore also gone, and offensive lineman Mason Brooks is gone as Panthers decided they want to keep some of those guys ahead of them instead. Week 1, we are here. We have made it. Cannot wait. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Then be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays throughout the regular season, I'll be here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council. So go ahead and get those questions into me right now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Tuesday.